I'm really pleased to introduce Allan Stam, who's the Dean of the Frank Batten School of Leadership and Public Policy and Professor of Public Policy here at UVA. This is our first opportunity to meet. I'm very pleased that you've been able to take time from your very busy schedule to be here with us. So
pleasure's mine. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. You need to know that previously he was director of the International Policy Center at the Gerald R. Ford School of Public Policy and professor of political science at the University of Michigan. His research focuses on the dynamics of armed conflict between and within states. Dean Stam has worked on several survey-based projects, including surveys conducted in our favorite, Russia, Rwanda, India, as well as web-based surveys in the United States. To help support a household survey in Rwanda, Dean Stam and his colleagues developed a GIS, which you'll have to explain.
Geographic Information Systems.
Sampling system based on randomly selected residents from known geographic points distributed randomly throughout the country's space. Dean Stam is currently assisting a trust that operates in India to help them conduct both a community attitude census as well as a household census in roughly, now get this, 120,000 households in approximately 1,800 rural villages. Amazing. In addition to tracking discriminatory behavior, Dean Stam and his colleagues have been assisting the NGO design community surveys to allow the NGO to track violent behaviors towards members of the subcaste population. So let's welcome Dean Stam.
Thank you all for coming. I guess you have to be here, so I can't attribute anything to me, although these must be my mysterious invisible friends at this table. The reason why nobody sits here. Again, thanks for having me. What I want to plant a seed in your mind. So I'm going to talk probably for about 25 minutes or so, and then I'll have time for questions, and hopefully I'll provoke a few. But I want to plant a seed. I want you to think about, while I'm talking, I want you to think about the relationship between emotion and rationality. David Brooks today in the New York Times had a great column about the tension between emotion and the technocracy, what he referred to as sort of big data, evidence-based public policy making. Okay, and I want that sort of think about, what is the relationship between emotions and rationality? I'm going to come back to that at the end. So I'm the dean of a school that is very unusual. It's almost unique in America. It's a school that is dedicated to leadership and public policy. There's schools of leadership. There's schools of public policy. People all over America, schools all over America talk about leadership. Very few schools put those two things together. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the first few minutes and talk about what those two are. And then I'm going to talk a little bit about Frank Batten, who was the founding donor of our school, what his sort of vision was, because I think it's a valuable thing for all of us to think about. So first off, when we think about leadership and public policy, lots of people get wrapped around the axle about this. When I first took this job, I've only been here at UVA for a little over 2 months. And when I first arrived, one of the things I did initially was I met with everybody in the school. Faculty, administrators, staff people, most of the students. And one of the questions I asked everybody was, what is leadership to you? And I was astonished at how difficult a time many people had explaining to me what leadership was. So after about a month of this, I got fed up with it and I said, look, it's really simple. It's not complicated. Leadership is the art of getting things done. Full stop. People were kind of like, wow. Okay, so I said, all right, fine. Here's what I have to do. I have to have a poster made. And so I did. And so now if you come into my office for a visit, please feel free to come do so. There's a big poster on my wall as you walk in that you can't miss. And it says, leadership is the art of getting things done. Very simple. Not easy, though. Therein lies the rub. What it is easy. It's like what Bill Clinton said about becoming elected president of the United States. It's simple. Get more votes than everybody else. Doing that is very hard. Simple, but not easy. Now, the second part of our school is public policy. What is that? Public policy is simply using data to sort out the costs and benefits of leaders' choices. So at the end, it all comes back to leaders and leadership. It's pretty simple. So we'll get back to that in a little bit. Let me talk about the gentleman that gave the money that essentially founded this school of leadership at UVA, which essentially the Batten School is a small school of leadership in a big university of leadership. Now, Frank Batten's view was different than most people today. Many of you are of the millennial generation. Those of us in the pedagogic and academic administrative business are told that individuals of the millennial generation are somehow different. That somehow, over the space of 5 to 10 years, millennials have evolved dramatically from all of their predecessors, and now we need to treat you differently. Many of you have been told from early life, you're special, which you are, but not in that way. It's all about you. It's all about you. It's all about you. You can do anything you want. You can be anything. You. It's all the focus is you. Well, Frank Batten thought that was great, but at the end of the day, he said what makes the world function are not atomistic individuals, but teams, groups of people. The problems we have today are so great, so challenging, that no individual is going to be able to solve them. No individual is going to be able to accomplish the things we need to accomplish in the next 20, 30, 40 years. As leaders, as team members, each of you, if you come to the conclusion, well, it's all about me, then your team's going to fail. So we need to think about how can we put aside our individual selves and become part of something bigger than ourselves. So the notion that we're all individually special, that we all should be able to pursue our own individual thing is great. And for many people, that is more than sufficient to motivate them and to capture their whole life. But those people, sort of myopically focused on self, will never know how extraordinary the experience is of being part of a true team. And, more importantly, from my perspective, they'll never know what it's like to really accomplish extraordinary great things. Because as I said a couple of minutes ago, all the really great things we want to accomplish require teams of individuals, groups of people coming together to work as a group, not as atomistic individuals. Now, Frank Batten believed in a number of things. He said, individuals and teams of like-minded people are what make the world function. He believed in research and data on the one hand, but he believed in loyalty on the other. So think back to my prompt for you, emotion and rationality. So Frank Batten, in case you don't know, Frank Batten was the chairman, CEO, and principal owner of Landmark Communications. Landmark Communications' last greatest thing was the Weather Channel. So if you go on the web and you type in weather.com, that's Frank Batten. If you go on TV, on cable news, the Weather Channel, that's Frank Batten. His son, Frank Batten Jr., was one of the principal owners of a technology company called Red Hat. Again, team, what distinguishes Red Hat Communications from, say, the Apple operating system is, the Red Hat is open source. Teams of individuals coming together to work as a group, not as individuals. Now, Frank Batten believed in this balance between research and data on the one hand, the rational side, loyalty on the other. How do you get through difficult times? All of us as individuals. We all have difficult, hard times in our lives. If they haven't happened yet, trust me, they will. It's part of being part of the human condition. It's why the Greeks wrote tragedies 2,000 years ago. It's why Shakespeare wrote tragedies 500 years ago. Our lives as human beings are tragic. So we need to think about how we deal with that. Well, how do we deal with that? Do we do it alone? No. We rely on others. So again, if our entire life up to the point in which we run into this really rough patch has been devoted solely to self, who's going to want to invest in us and help us when we need a helping hand if we haven't spent the better part of our lives up to that point putting our hand out for other people, both at work and in our families and the rest of our lives? Now, Frank Batten also believed that we should take great risks, emotion, do something that other people say is crazy. The Weather Channel, stupid. Who wants to watch weather 24/7? Everyone in the industry, in the telecommunications industry, told Frank Batten a sole television station dedicated to the weather is dumb. He said, maybe, but I don't know. Everybody needs to know what the weather is every day. And the weather changes from morning to noon to night. And there's big weather events that you can build stories around. Let's try it. And so he makes a huge investment in this. Partly reason-based, partly emotionally based. Now, he also believed that you have to have the knowledge and the skills to be able to do the data analysis to know when to cut your losses. So, Landmark Communication looks at Europe as this great untapped market. And they say, look, Europe is about the same size as a collective market as the United States of America. At the time, it was about 420 million people. The United States is about 320 million people. They got like 32 countries. We have 50 states. How different could it be? So they try to make Weather Channel Europe. Utter, complete failure. They pour tens of millions, hundreds of millions of dollars into it. Fails. So after a couple of years, Frank Batten says, it's a failure. I made a mistake. I was wrong. Kill it. And so they did. Made a lot of money, made a lot of friends, doing visionary work in one area, but was willing to cut his losses elsewhere. He also believed in the power of people, but of a particular type. Not everyone. So here's an example. Frank Batten had a test. If an executive would come to him that he wanted to hire for his corporation, and the executive said, oh, and by the way, as part of my compensation package, I'd like a membership at a golf club, which is pretty standard. Frank Batten would say, thank you so much for your time. I appreciate you taking the time to talk with me. It's been great. And that was it. Interview was over. Why? Well, because Frank felt two things. One, if somebody really needs to belong to a country club membership, either they're not working at the office, they have enough time on their hands, they should be playing golf. They shouldn't be playing golf. The other was, though, that he felt that was a private expense. That was a choice that individual made. Other people would make similar but different choices. Why should we subsidize? Why should a corporation subsidize the choices of one individual versus those choices of another? And he paid his employees very well, and he felt, you're very well compensated. If there's something that you would like to do in your private time, feel free to do so, but don't expect me to pay for it. Even if this is the tradition of many large corporations. Now, Frank Batten's given more to the University of Virginia, he and his family, than any other family to date. I think we owe them a little bit of our will, effort, and best efforts to move forward. Now, how can we do this? How can we pursue this kind of success for ourselves as individuals? Well, I think of three ways that we as individuals need to mind our own business. Three attributes that no matter what your interests, no matter what your tastes, you're as first-year students, you have 30 classes, plus minus, left in your college careers. What do you want to do with those 30 classes? Well, the first one is develop some skills, something marketable. At some point in your lives, most of you, not all of you, looking at the data, most of you, though, will have to work for someone as part of a group. First question you want to ask for yourself is, what skill can I offer to this group that other people can't? If you answer that question and say, well, not really, anything. Then you have to pose the subsequent question of, well, if I can't offer anything to this group, why would the group want to have me around? So in our school, at the Batten School, we teach people to have skills in data management and analysis. All right? So going back to leadership is the art of getting things done, this is the things part. Skills. For us, it's data analysis. Now, data analysis is not for everybody. But we want to train people to be able to know what is the cost of thing A versus thing B. To be able to decide which of these things do I want to pursue from an efficiency perspective. Second thing of this triangle of success is knowledge. Substantive knowledge. Over the next 4 years, become an expert in something. The beauty of this is it can be anything. And here's why. When you're done with your career at the University of Virginia, you want to go off in the world and be part of a great team to solve and address the problems of the world. You need to convince people, first, that you can do something for them, and two, you need to convince them that you're educable, that you can be trained, that you can learn. Well, how do you do that? Well, you demonstrate to them that you're an expert in something, that you know things about something. And literally, it can be anything. It could be the history of the University of Virginia. It could be knowing more about the provision of nuclear power. It could be knowing something about art, music, science, mathematics, literature. But that you know more about that one thing than, in all likelihood, anyone else in the room. Now, what that does is, one, it convinces people that, wow, this person knows a lot about something. Now, it could be something very mainstream, or it could be something quite esoteric. But you'll be able to convince them. They'll say, wow, how did you learn all of this about X, Y, or Z? You say, I taught myself. I took courses in it. I read about it. I really think it's amazing. Can I explain to you, articulate to you why I think this thing is so cool? Let me share some of my knowledge with you. See, again, it's not all about you. It's about sharing what you have with others. Employers of any ilk find that staggeringly attractive. Third part of this triangle. So we get skills, we get knowledge. The last one, and it's the easiest, attitude. Leadership. Now, what are the core attributes of leaders? Now, leaders do a bunch of things. So at the Batten School, we're building a curriculum built around the things that leaders do. They bargain. They negotiate. They do conflict resolution. They manage group dynamics. But those aren't personal attributes. Those are skill things. I want to talk a little bit about what are the attributes and attitudes of leaders. The first one is persistence. Life is hard. If you're taking an academic program here at the University of Virginia that's worthwhile, it'll be hard. Abraham Lincoln, Harry Truman, Bill Clinton, George Bush, Ronald Reagan, Winston Churchill, all of them, losers. Utter failures. Every single one of them. Before their greatest successes. Winston Churchill, if he had died in 1939, he would have been considered by history a reckless, unintelligent, overly emotional buffoon who was a failure as a leader. Ronald Reagan ran for the highest office in the United States, failed abysmally before he didn't. Bill Clinton, many failures in President Clinton's life. Today, he is widely regarded as one of our great politicians in history, whether how we view his personal peccadillos. Abraham Lincoln loses elections, businesses fail, becomes in the end, though, one of our greatest leaders. Even in their triumphs, their detractors still consider them losers. Every single one of those people I mentioned, there are groups of folks out there that think, wow, those people, that person is amazing. There are others that think that person is evil incarnate. Ronald Reagan. Conservatives think they should put another head on Mount Rushmore and it should be Reagan's. Liberals think Ronald Reagan is anathema, one of the worst presidents ever. Persistence. I flunked out of college twice. My freshman year at the University of Chicago, I lasted 1.5 quarters. I took some time off. I worked in a furniture factory. I made dental office furniture for 8 months. I worked on a bandsaw for the first 2 months, cutting out of wood dental armchair blanks. 8 hours a day, 600 armchair blanks a day, 5 days a week. That got me fired up to go back to college. I went to Cornell University. Spent 2 years at Cornell. And then was expelled. Gone. As the John Hyatt says, gone. Like my last paycheck. That was it. I came home. My parents said, we're done. It's over. Move out. We don't want you here anymore. You are self-absorbed, myopic, and stupid. Get out. It's like, wow, that's pretty harsh. So, got a job, delivered blood for the Red Cross for a while. Took a job, I worked in a restaurant, worked my way up to be a sous chef. And then I enlisted in the United States Army. Went in as a private. It was a huge shock for me. I was from northern New England. Both of my parents had been professors at Harvard. Here I am, a private infantryman at Fort Benning, Georgia. It was rough. Did not like it. It took me 2 attempts to complete the United States Army Special Forces School. Sometimes like you see on the History Channel or whatever. That was one of these TV shows. I was watching this TV show about Special Forces School and the selection course with my now 22-year-old, then 16-year-old son. And we're watching this thing on TV, and he goes, oh my God, did you actually do that? I said, yeah, not only did I do it once, I did it twice, because the first time through, at the end, I failed. I had to do it all over again. He's like, I don't know whether you're crazy, stupid, or what. After I completed my 2 graduate degrees at the University of Michigan, I applied for academic jobs all over the country. Not only did I not get a job, I didn't get a single interview. So I went back to graduate school for a postgraduate year again for another year of training. My first book was rejected by 14 publishers. The most personal failure, the first time I asked my wife to marry me, she said no. Now, some people would interpret being rejected so often and failing so frequently as a sign that you're a loser. And I was. What changed for me was making that transition from self to others, to realizing it's not all about me, that I can accomplish great things only if I commit myself to being part of something bigger than me and dedicate all my energies to that. So the problem is today, though, people today interpret being rejected as a sign that somebody or someone doesn't want them around. And so, after tweeting about it, they quit trying. It's all about the try. So when I was in college, 3rd time, I rode crew. Really got into it, really liked it a lot. When I was a professor at Dartmouth College, I ended up on the athletic advisory board. And I ended up on a search committee to hire a new crew coach for Dartmouth. And I settled in on, I and the other members of the search committee settled in on this guy. He was then the freshman crew coach at the Naval Academy. And he had had what was then an unprecedented series of success. In 4 years as the coach at the Naval Academy, coaching men's freshman crew, in 4 years, his men had lost 1 race. They'd gone 14-0, 13-1, 14-0, 14-0. Freshman crew, so it's a new crew every year. He couldn't say, oh, well, I had these great 4 guys and I just rode them for 4 years straight. It was lightweight crew, so they're all exactly the same size. So I said to him, I said, Steve, what's your secret? How do you do this? Year after year after year, enjoy such unprecedented success as a leader and as a coach. He said, it's easy. He says, crew, as in life, is all about working harder than everybody else at this thing that you love. He said, what we do is we convince our oarsmen that work is the pleasure. That work is what we do this for. That it's the work, the training, that what we dig. So like if you do computer science, it's the writing the code, it's not the app on somebody's phone. If you're an artist, it's the brushstrokes, not the standing back and looking at it. It's the doing that he trained them to love. And so his oarsmen then, and at Dartmouth, and now he's the head coach of all crew back at the Naval Academy, where he continues to have great success. His crews, year after year, location after location, rise to the top because he's managed to convince people that what really matters is, it's not the end product, it's the work. It's the voyage to get there, not the destination. So, let's come back to this thing about rationality and emotion. Leadership is the art of getting things done. Now today, public policy schools all over America, what they focus on is the data analysis, the policy analysis, public policy. Which policy is the most efficient? That's great. But if we look around us, how many people, I mean, you all read the newspaper, you're in Brown College, you're at the University of Virginia, you're sentient human beings, you're exceedingly bright, and you're crazy well informed. One of the themes today in America is nothing's getting done. We hear about gridlock. Our government is dysfunctional. Businesses can't accomplish what they want. What's to be done about this? Well, part of the problem is that we've raised a generation of technocrats. This is not a millennial issue. This is a 50-year issue going back to the 1960s. As these policy schools emerged, they're dominated by economists. Economists are all about discovering, identifying the most efficient solutions. Economists are always astonished when the most efficient solution, which seems obvious to them and that they can explain easily to any human being, doesn't happen. They're like, I just don't understand it. Pick up a column by in the New York Times, Paul Krugman, Nobel Prize winning economist, made his chops in trade economics. He writes columns excoriating anybody from the center to the right, saying these people must be idiots. They're obstructionist. What part of all of this brilliant economics don't they get? What they don't get is that the economic solutions that people like Krugman offer have distributional consequences that affect their community differentially than other communities. People on the left have the same view. Hillary Clinton was at a Senate hearing a couple of years ago. And she said at the Senate hearing, she was getting quite frustrated because she was being interrogated and people were asking questions. And she got, in a fit of pique and a little exasperation, she said, look, if you knew the things I know, you would agree with me. It's like, well, maybe, but then again, maybe not. People on the right have exactly the same views, though. So what the economist, this efficient solution problem is that while there is an economically efficient solution, all of these solutions in our lives, not all, many of them, contrary to what we've been told for many of us in our early lives, they don't all have win-win solutions. To put it in the terms of economists, not all policy choices are Pareto improving. They don't make everybody better off. So the economists say, simple solution. Oh my God, it's so easy. Why are you people not getting this? So for example, say we think about access to a bridge. The economist says what we need to do is if we have a rush hour backup problem, is simply put in place time-based differential tolls. And what we do is, if you want to go across the bridge at 8 o'clock in the morning, we charge you $50. If you want to go across the bridge in the middle of the day or at midnight, we charge you $2. And what that does is, that encourages people to stop commuting at 8 o'clock in the morning and move to noon. But here's a challenge. Say you work in a service industry on the other side of that bridge, and you're paid $8.50 an hour. You don't have any choice. You got to get to your job. Why? Because your employer doesn't care about the differential timing, so the economist says that's okay. We'll make a transfer payment. We'll simply take some of the money from the taxes that the wealthy people pay and give it to the poor person. For an economist, the money is simply fungible. It goes back and forth. It doesn't matter how you earn the money if somebody gives it to you versus whether you earn it. Let's come back to this now. Emotion and rationality. Now ask yourself, if somebody comes up to you and gives you a $10 bill, do you have the same emotional attachment to those $10 as you do if you spent an hour shoveling gravel and were paid $10 to shovel gravel for an hour? Are those two $10 bills equal? Somebody simply saying, here, I really don't need this because I have so many of them, you take it. Versus somebody saying, you know what? I have 7,000 pounds of gravel that need to be moved.
You gotta plug that back in.
Oh my God. Honey, you're breaking my roll. So you have this huge pile of gravel you have to move. All right? So you do it. It takes an hour. It's 90 degrees out. It's in the summer in Virginia. You move the gravel from here onto the back of a truck. And you're going sweating, you're dying. You say, $10, please. Yeah, gives you $10 to get an hour. So do you feel the same about those two $10 bills? Well, the economist says, well, of course you do, because they buy the same amount of stuff. The social psychologist says, what are you, stupid? Of course not. An earned dollar has greatly more valuable than a given dollar. So, distributional costs, how we transfer income. There's an emotional component to that. If we think about this art of getting things done, we need to think about not just the efficiency-based aspects of these things, but the human impact of these things. How do these things we decide to do affect people's communities, their lives, their families, and their friends? Only then can we start thinking about how do we lead things to get things done. Think about education policy. Privatization versus public education. Education in the United States is seen by some people as a right. Other people see education as a duty and an obligation. Well, if we frame education as a right, something that I am entitled to, well, that frames the provision of education and the content of that education in a particular way. If we frame the first question, though, as education, you have a duty and an obligation to educate yourself to the greatest level possible so that you can serve others, well, that leads to a different implication about what should be in our curriculum and the content of it. Say we think about healthcare. National single-payer system versus private insurance. Is healthcare a right, an entitlement, or is healthcare, access to healthcare, something that should be tied to some other set of activities? Or maybe it's more nuanced than that. Maybe we want to be like Switzerland and have a public-private hybrid. Maybe we decide, no, people have a right to a basic level of health care. And then if you want to have plastic surgery, if you want to have, I can think of all kinds of optional kinds of surgeries, surgeries that will help you run faster, jump higher, look better, self-absorbed surgeries. Well, then you have to pay for those yourself. Well, where's the line between basic health care provision and optional health care provision? That's a value judgment. It's a moral judgment. It's a personal community judgment. The economist, the public policy solution can't help us there. Now, got about 10 minutes or so. Here at UVA, how does this play out for you? I'm curious. I'm new. I'm the new guy. We've all arrived at the same time. I'm a first-year student dean. I'm kind of like, there's a book called The Accidental Tourist about somebody that ends up traveling somewhat unwittingly at the outset. But he sees and learns all kinds of things that he wouldn't had he been the deliberate tourist. So what are the experiences that you've had in your first month or so at UVA in this context of sort of rationality versus emotion, leadership versus followership that have jumped out at you, that weren't maybe what you quite expected?
Emotional fear of taking too many credits versus rational assessment of how many credits I should take to get a degree, or if I want to transfer to something, or things like that. The fear versus actual what the value of it is.
How do you resolve that? Or if you have, how did you?
I guess assessing how real the fear, emotional side was, how much of it was an emotional reaction and how much was actually something that was real that I should be concerned about.
Mm-hmm. What does fear tell you? Individually. You feel fear, anxiety.
Uncertainty.
How do you interpret that?
Uncertainty.
Uncertainty? And what is that, like a call to do what? To not do something? I'm curious. Again, this is a totally honest question. I'm curious.
I feel like fear is something that needs to be overcome. I feel like that's your body telling you you have to do something.
It's your body telling you. That's absolutely right. Now, one way to interpret fear is you have fear of too many credits, fear of failure. This is an emotional response, physiological. There's all kinds of physiological things going on when you feel that fear. The more common interpretation today in education circles and family circles is fear is telling you to stop. Don't do it. In my training in the military, in the special forces, we did a lot of things that were cold, stone cold scary, terrifying. You see all these people doing crazy stuff. You're like, wow, there must be something wrong with them because they must not feel fear. No, they're feeling fear, but they've been trained to use that emotion differently. That they've been trained to note, to physically recognize fear, emotionally recognize fear, not as a sign of uncertainty, not as a sign of don't do it, but as a sign of pay attention. Use your rational brain. Stop for a moment. Think. Why is if you're a fan of Spider-Man, why is my spider sense tingling right now? Because that's what it is. Fear generates, your pulse increases a little bit, your blood pressure increases a little bit. Sometimes like the hair on the back of your neck will stand up a little bit. You'll feel a little flush. Some people's faces get a little bit redder. It's a physiological response. Everybody gets it. Think. So what are some of the kinds of things? So we have courses engender this emotion, rationality, tipping scale, fear. What are some of the other things that have been scary here as freshmen, as first-year students? Yeah.
Well, in light of what's happened with anagram, it's pretty scary to leave grounds.
Absolutely, absolutely. So how can we manage this? How can we react to this fear, anxiety, uncertainty, this, again, physical response? How have you talked about addressing this?
Pepper spray.
What's that?
Pepper spray.
Pepper spray, that's right. Defend yourselves. I'll tell you a story about defending my home in New Hampshire against an armed intruder sometime. Other ways, though. Buddy system, teams, teamwork, pairs, groups. Don't be alone unless you feel like you're in a safe place. Now, what does it also tell us, though? There are some places that may appear safe that aren't. If we have that emotional response in a place, and now this doesn't have to be a physical place, this can also be an emotional place. It can be an emotional place that's anxiety-provoking, makes you feel uncertain, makes you feel fearful. Well, think. The moment you get that feeling, stop and think. What are some other settings that have engendered or created this tension between emotion, rationality, fear, and anxiety? Can anybody think of others?
Fear of fitting in and being part of the community, especially as a new student.
Yeah, so many of you, all of you, new people to UVA, there's a handful of people that are gifted in the ability to integrate into groups of people that aren't just like them. Human beings are hardwired to be group social creatures in homogeneous communities. To get out of that requires us to be able to engage this, to basically overcome this fear, anxiety, uncertainty reaction. How do you do it? what do you think?
What everyone always says is put yourself out there.
Yeah?
You just gotta
What might a strategy be for that? Yeah.
It's kind of what you were saying earlier, how you can't really think anymore about yourself. You have to kind of engage yourself in them and something else besides you.
That's right. And there's a group. And what's the other thing? If you're feeling this, if you were a betting person, what would you bet? If I'm feeling this way? Exactly. Most other people are too. If you feel anxious, odds are most other people are feeling anxious if they're in the same situation. Group settings reduce our anxiety, reduce our fear. Now, this is not to say don't ever be alone. Some of the great things that come out of like human intellectual development have been by people that were bored. So, note to self, turn off your electronic devices. And alone. Solitary time, solitary thought. Interacted with, going back and forth with groups. Another thing that I read an article not long ago when I accepted the job as dean. I was like, wow, I've never really been an administrator before. I better read up on it. And because one of the things you have to do as a dean is you have to do all this social stuff. I'm a mildly antisocial human being. I don't like groups. I don't like crowds. When I was in college, I hated frat parties. I like small groups of people, 4, 5, 6 people, so that I can see how people are reacting to what everyone else says and what I say. In a big crowd, you can't hear, can't tell. But I realized, got to do it. So, before every event, I make a note card. The goal of every event is meet 5 new people. When I've met the 5 new people, I'm done. And so, so one of the duties of a dean is you have to go to every football game. My wife, she likes people, she's very friendly and all of that, she's a school teacher, but she gets anxious in groups and crowds. And so I said to her, all right, we're going to go to these football games, we're each going to meet 5 new people, and then we'll watch the football game, because we both love football, okay? And she said, oh, okay. And so then it turned into something of a challenge between the two of us. Who could get their 5 first? Who could meet the cooler 5 people? Who could meet the richest 5 people? So we had all of these different things that turned it into something that was fun instead of just work. And then all of a sudden we realized we did this 4 or 5 times. It wasn't new, so it wasn't nearly as anxiety provoking. All of a sudden we have this skill. And so now it's actually kind of creeps me out a little bit how malleable our brains are. Now I can walk into a room of 50 uber wealthy people and feel totally at home asking them things that, wow, I would never have asked these people before 3 months ago. But practice and routine makes it easier. It makes it more comfortable. My brain starts to say, no, this is safe. And so I continue to do it. Are we out of time? I see you like stalking me in the back.
Just setting the stage for the opportunity for you to get to your 5 o'clock thing on time.
Well, there you have it.
Need to do. So let's give him a round of applause. As a small token of our appreciation,
well, thank you.
Memory of Brown.
Well, thank you very
Hopefully
much.
you will put that on your desk and you will look at it and you will think of us and you will find an opportunity to come over and join us.
Okay,
here.
stop talking for a second because I have 35 seconds. Now, here's my pitch. All right, I'm dean of the best school here at the University of Virginia. If you're interested in leadership and public policy, in the middle of your 2nd year, you'll come and apply and become part of our community. We're not for everybody. We're small. 300 students total. Postgraduate master's program, accelerated master's program, undergraduate bachelor's curriculum. But small school at a big university gives you access to something many people won't have. So thank you so much for taking the time to talk with me.
And
I appreciate
you should know they can be in Brown and be in Batten.
Absolutely.
And I'm all about the Brown-Batten connection. Absolutely. It's B&B, Brown and Batten. Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.